Hello and welcome to another episode of JunkDrawer Studio. Today we're going to make a really cool custom chess set carved entirely out of XPS foam. All you need is the foam, a snap blade, some paint, maybe a couple other small things if you want, but you honestly don't even need, and you can make something like this. So if you want to make something like that, this episode is for you. Welcome back to JunkDrawer Studio. Yes, today we are going to be making a custom chess set out of foam. I've wanted to do this for actually a really long time, and I have sort of attempted this before, not on this channel, but just in the past as like a creative endeavor. But my issue, well, there are several issues. I mostly just lacked the commitment to see it through. But another issue I would have is I always had these really cool ideas for themes, and I kind of quickly realized that my issue with custom chess sets that are themed, which you can buy in the stores, like I'm sure a Marvel themed chess set exists. I know a Super Mario themed chess set exists. There's all sorts of sets, but I find it's difficult when a king doesn't look like a king or a bishop doesn't look like a bishop. You've already memorized what these classic chess pieces look like, so I want to make a chess set that resembles an actual chess set that still has a lot of theme and an interesting look to it. So that's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna make a really cool thematic chess set with some pretty basic materials that you can find at a local hardware store for the most part. So let's jump in without further ado and get started with the chess set. I started this build the way I start most of my builds, which is with a concept sketch. I knew I wanted to carve these out of inch-thick XPS foam, so I thought I would start with an inch-thick square block of XPS foam. The reason why I'm drawing it on the paper with pencil first is because I want this to be easy on myself. I don't have a hot wire cutter, so I'm going to be carving these with a blade by hand. So I started with the block shape just so that I could design the pieces to be recognizable, but achievable, to have minimal cuts into this inch-thick block. So that's kind of why I drew that pencil block before I designed the shapes of the pieces. I want them to be blocky and kind of as close to the block shape as possible. I do make a slight change in this rook design and a couple of the other designs when I actually go to carving, but for the most part, this step of concepting the shapes was really helpful and helped me make really confident cuts when I get to carving these out of XPS foam. Some of the shapes are obviously a lot more complicated, like the horse/knight that you see me drawing here, and honestly, it wasn't that bad in the end because I planned. I wanted these to be easy enough to do with a snap blade. The idea for this chess set, thematically speaking, because remember, I do want this to have a cool theme, even though I want the pieces to be recognizable like classic chess pieces, is imagine you go into this clearing and you see this overgrown garden with sort of a massive chessboard baked into the dirt of the forest. There's grass everywhere, and you see these massive stone pillars that resemble chess pieces. Maybe they're all broken and dilapidated, and they're just larger than life statues that have kind of been in the woods for, who knows, years. There's not really more to the story. I haven't figured out if there's anything more to this story, but that's the vibe I'm going for. Also, I'm just realizing it's a very similar vibe to my Tonks video. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, but you like the vibe of spooky forest, old statues kind of thing, check out that video. It'll be on the screen somewhere. That's the vibe. That's the theme I'm going for, is like secret garden, discarded old stone chess set. The pawn design really helps with the world building, and I know you're thinking, why do you need world building in a chess set? You don't, but I like that kind of stuff. I feel like the pawns were maybe once another piece, a rook or a knight or a queen, and have become pawns. I don't know, it's kind of sad, but I like that. For the king and the queen, I went with really simple designs. I do want the king to be taller than it appears here, but otherwise I just went with a really simple design for these two. I want them to be, again, recognizable and easy to carve. So I hung up the concepts with an easy view of my desk, and Anyway, back to what I was saying. Those of you who watch my JunkDrawer series will recognize this 12-inch wooden board. This is what I built my graveyard diorama on, and I had another one, and I thought it would be a perfect chessboard. I wasn't entirely sure what size I wanted the squares, but I made a couple little template pieces just to see how 8 across would look, and I decided that the perfect size was 1 1/4 inches. It was a little bit bigger than the intended size of the pieces, but also left a little bit of space around the squares on the board to add a little extra detail, which I have planned for later. Moving on to the build, I have so much scrap XPS foam and I was determined to use as much of it for this as possible rather than add to my scrap pile. So I grabbed a bunch of scraps of the 1/2 inch size, and if you thought I just didn't have more, no, I do. I have a lot more. That's actually the problem. I have so much XPS foam that, God, I need to start using the scraps before I dig into any of this new stuff. So that is what I did. I just started measuring out the pieces. I went with 3 inches tall for all the pieces, 1 1/2 inch for the pawns, and I believe 4 inches for the kings that I wanted to be a little bit taller just so that they would be super recognizable. You just need a sharp blade and patience. Let the blade do the work, do multiple cuts, and you'll end up with a smooth, perfect side, just like that, rather than like a jagged, ripped one. XPS foam cuts really easily, but it also rips really easily, so you do need to be careful and just trust your blade to do the work for you. Don't force it. I had all the pieces cut out. Those are the pawns. These are the big pieces, but I had one remaining that I needed, and I simply, with all this scrap, did not have a piece big enough. I didn't want to resort to gluing, so I needed to bust out this entire sheet of XPS foam for one final piece. Very frustrating. But with that, I had all 16 pieces of the big, actually 18 because I made 2 queens. If you know, you know, and all 16 pawns. Then I started carving. I'm a little self-conscious about these clips because it looks like I don't know what I'm doing with the blade. Could I stand to practice better knife safety? Yeah, sure, I'm sure I could, but I promise I'm safer than it looks here. You can't really judge the effort I'm putting behind the blade from these clips. The angle is kind of hard to see too. I promise I'm being careful. You need to be super careful when you use a sharp blade, so please consider this a PSA. I carved a dilapidated pawn as sort of a proof of concept, and I carve the other pawns off camera later, but this is kind of the look I'm going for, this kind of broken down, rocky look. Once I had that done, I decided I should actually carve the main shapes of all the pieces first before worrying about all the textured, pitted, broken details. So that's what I did. I really took my time with this. I used my concept drawings as guides. I made a couple slight deviations, like with the rook. This is probably the most different because I realized that carving all those little tiny parts of the top of the rook would be pretty difficult, so I stuck with 4 bigger kind of castle knobs that you see here. And I wasn't worried about the tiny little imperfections because, again, I am going to be texturing and roughing these up. I was trying to be pretty careful though, so yeah, I just took my time, carved in all the shapes that I needed for these pieces, and I'm super stoked with these. It was really therapeutic and fun to carve these out. I was really nervous about the horse. I feel like knights are always the most complicated shapes in any chess set, especially if you have ones that are carved into wood. Most of them can be done on like a spinning, I think it's called an awl. That's not what it's called. What's it called? Lathe. That's what it's called. I paused doing the voiceover just to look that up. But you can't do the knight on the lathe, at least not like 90% of it, because it's so intricate. And the same thing went for this. That was the most complicated one, but I think I pulled it off. Here I am carving the crown into the queen. This was really fun. I wasn't sure if this would be doable. I don't know. I'm a very visual person, and the whole like math of it all like wasn't working in my head. I kind of just had to do it to see if what I thought would work did work, and it did. I made a little 4-pointed crown. Again, it's not perfect, but these aren't supposed to be perfect. They're supposed to be broken down, rocky, old looking pieces. Here is our king and queen ready to be textured. Love how these two came out. And here are all the rest of the pieces. And all the pawns that I carved off camera, just looking like big broken pieces. I like the pawn. The pawns you can have a little bit of fun with because there's so many of them that you're not going to mistake them for a different piece, even though I wanted most of these to be recognizable. Finally, I got to the detailing of the pieces. I loved this technique of sliding the blade in like halfway straight and then just popping the XPS foam off so it kind of snaps off and really looks like slate or like a rocky kind of broken, shattered piece. I'm not describing this well, but I love the way it looks. I also took some tweezers, as you see here, and kind of pulled at the XPS to look like broken off chunks of rock. Again, I'll say it probably multiple more times in this video, but I'm really happy with this. I love texturing XPS. I have a lot of videos in my catalog where I use XPS foam in a similar way, but this is by far the most successful, or at least the happiest I've ever been with texturing and carving stony like material out of XPS. This technique of the flat blade kind of chunking bits off, I'm super stoked with it. I think it looks awesome. I love how these little corner details look, especially. If you don't play a lot of chess and you're wondering why there's 2 queens per side, that's because it's pretty typical in a chess game to promote your pawns. If a pawn reaches all the way to the other side of the board, you can promote them, which is to say you can make them any piece, but there's really no reason why you wouldn't do a queen. So typical chess sets come with 2 queens to accommodate that. I carved up most of these off camera, and I'm really happy with the results. I think it just would have been harder to do while filming. I'm super happy with these details. I feel like the little ripped parts really look like cracked kind of stone, and these big sort of flat cuts really look like stone that's sort of like sheathed off. I don't know if that's like the correct verb, but I feel like it just kind of like slate kind of like shatters. I'm just saying words at this point that sound kind of right. It just kind of looks like the stone has kind of cut away in slates, in this sort of like strata, like delicate kind of rock and stone tends to do. This set is purposefully very pitted and messy. I'm gonna add even more texture to this in a later step with some tinfoil and maybe like some real rocks. I want this to look really kind of dilapidated, stony, crumbly kind of look. That's going to be our white set. I might not actually paint them white, but just in terms of traditional set, that's going to be the light painted stone. I want it to be kind of like dusty stone. The other set, I have not carved any detail into yet, but I'm going to. And I'm going to give it a similar treatment. However, I'm probably just going to stick to what I've been calling like sheaths. I know that's not the right word. And probably not too much of the little pits, probably not as many of those cuts in general. I want mostly flat, chunky bits of stone because these are still gonna be dilapidated and old looking and kind of run down looking, but I want these to look like marble. So I'm going to try to keep a lot of them flat and as clean as possible with a couple strategic kind of cuts so it still looks old and dilapidated, but just looks less like crumbly stone and more like marble. Now, I'm not a geologist. I don't know if this is exactly true, but in my head, marble is much more durable and tough than just your average piece of stone. Geologists, let me know in the comments if that's true. For the pawns, I did break them down a little bit more. I've already carved a lot of the pawns from the quote unquote marble, because the story of the pawns is sort of that they have, you know, that maybe they were big pieces at one point and kind of became pawns after really deteriorating a lot. As promised, here I am texturing the stone/white set of pieces with tinfoil. You know this method, you love it, I certainly do. It's tried and true for a reason. It works really, really well. Super cheap texturing material, and it honestly, like, can't be beat. I feel like it works perfectly. I took some screws to add a little bit of weight to the pieces. This is really important because the foam is so light, and with a chess set, you're going to be using it, you're going to be moving it around. So making them a bit heavier was pretty imperative in my mind anyway. I screwed in a bunch of those. I was worried because the screws are pretty thick, but it didn't really displace the foam at all. It actually worked perfectly. So apparently you can use pretty thick screws into foam and it will not mess up the design at all. Here are some very important and exciting tests that I did to demonstrate. The one on the left has a screw in it, the one on the right does not, and you can see it's just one big fat screw, but it is a noticeable difference, and when you're playing, it would be really annoying if the pieces were falling all over. All right, a whole box of screws later, and we're done. Little ones for pieces where I was worried that the bigger one was gonna like come through, like right in here. But most of the big ones just have one giant screw on the bottom. They are much heftier. These are gonna be really, really fun to play with. I've also gone ahead and textured all of the stone ones. They're looking real nice. Let me show you in better lighting. Ooh, pretty. Here they are side by side, the two sort of kings on opposing sets. At this point, I was so excited to paint. So before I clean up the copious amounts of foam all over my desk, I have one more thing to cut, which is the squares that are gonna go on our wooden board here to create the squares of the chessboard. I have a bunch of 1/2-inch pieces, and I'm just gonna take those, cut them into squares, weather them up a little bit in a very similar way to how I did these. Now allow me to throw you to future Betsy to see how they turned out. Thank you, past Betsy. Here is future Betsy dubbing over way in the past Betsy, because I actually filmed that previous talking head after I had cut these, but I made it seem like I hadn't. I don't know why I'm explaining any of this. I cut some squares out of 1/2-inch XPS foam, but I realized they were still too thick for what I was just picturing. So I freehand cut them in half long ways. And yes, they are a little uneven, but I am absolutely going to use that to my advantage. I think that creates a really cool, natural look of these stones. If you haven't kind of figured it out already, I'm really setting a world for this chess set, which I know is not necessary at all, but it's what I like to do. So this is gonna look like an old, dilapidated garden kind of chess set. I took some rocks, I put them in this old container. If you recognize this, perhaps you've seen my JunkDrawer video where I exploded them all over my office. Yeah, I'm not gonna let that happen today, so please put your hand on top of the lid when shaking this. So yeah, those looked pretty good. Now I just needed to glue them on to the board. I marked the center of the board, but from there I thought I could honestly just eyeball placement. And eyeball I did. So I took all the squares of foam, some tacky glue, a little bit of super glue also to keep them in place, but not so much that I couldn't brute force reposition them if I had to, and just glued them on. There's really not much more to this part of the process, although I will say it was pretty therapeutic. You can kind of see from this angle how some of them are uneven, and I like that. It adds to this old look that I'm going for with just the overall story of these chess pieces and chessboard. I added a bit more texture with some tin foil, especially to the pieces that I knew would be the greenish color space as opposed to the black dark space that is going to be more like marble. And I love how this came out. but I did need to fill those gaps, and I wanted to add a little bit of texture paste to the outside as well, because I'm going to be adding grass. I know that's weird. I talk about it a little bit later, but I wanted to do it. So first I textured these even more. I didn't go overboard with this, but I added a couple selective cracks just to really give this some life. I did the same method I did on the chess pieces with the tweezers, and I love these. I think they're beautiful. I didn't dirty and mess up too many of them, but I just wanted to add a little bit of character, and I'm really happy with them. Back to the texture that I just mentioned, I was inspired by Trent and wanted to try this water putty. I have never used this before. I also had some grout. I mixed them together and slapped it all over the board. Now at this point in the voiceover, I could absolutely make it seem like I've done this before, but I gotta tell ya, I haven't. Threw a bunch of stuff in a bowl, added some glue, added a little bit of water, mixed it up. It started to look a little bit like peanut butter and was starting to make me hungry. And I just slapped it all over the edges and into the cracks. The way I got it into the cracks was using a plastic bag and doing a very unsatisfying snip of the tip of the bag, and then just piped it in. Why did I do it this way? I don't know. Haven't you figured that out by now? I'm making this up, you guys. It actually worked really well. Is this the best texture paste? Is this the best technique overall? Probably not. But like, honestly, if you get anything from my videos, it should be this. Just go for it. Just make stuff. Just do stuff. Be careful. Be safe. Don't do anything reckless. But you know, using some grout, using some water putty to just make a kind of weird texture paste that looks like peanut butter, yeah, do that. I highly recommend it. The application wasn't perfect. You'll see in a second. There were some cracks after this dried, and that was a little perplexing to me because the water putty apparently is not supposed to have cracks. The grout that I got was for wide gaps, so I don't really know why it cracked. But again, I'm gonna be covering this with flock. My main goal with this was just to have an uneven surface so that the grass wouldn't be sitting on a perfectly flat wooden board, so that it would look a little bit more natural. So this absolutely worked for my purposes. It was also super hard. So does it look great? No, but it worked fine. Hey, real quick, before we move on to the next section, I'm bringing back a segment that I like to call the question of the video. This is the segment where I like to get to know my audience. So I'm gonna ask you a question and I want you to answer down in the comments below so I can get to know you guys. Today's question is a very pointed one. I just simply want to know, do you buy merch from other creators online, or even just like merch of any kind? Do you like to buy merch? If so, what kind of merch do you like to buy? Do you like t-shirts? That's a pretty popular one. Other side of accessories like bags, phone cases, notebooks, I don't know, anything. More specialty products. Why do you like to buy merch? Do you like to buy merch simply because you want to support that creator, or does it have to be something that you really, really want and like the style of, kind of regardless of the creator making it? You know what I mean? Is it more a stylistic thing for you, or do you just like to support the person? There is no wrong answer, but I am asking for maybe a particular reason. Let me know all of your thoughts, even if it's not something I specifically just asked about merch, in the comments below. Even if you don't like to buy merch, I want to know that too. So let me know your merch buying interests and habits in the comments below. Back to the video. All right, everything is primed and ready to paint. I used the typical kind of foam sealant that a lot of people in our hobby use, which would be Mod Podge, black paint, and a little bit of water.
I have a notification for Betsy.
This happens all the time when I'm filming. I mean, I guess it's just because I set notifications a lot. Hey, what's the notification?
Hi, Betsy. You have one notification. A task called...
Yeah, I do have to do that. I'll be right back. I'm back. Primed these up, black paint, Mod Podge. I did several coats. I wanted these to be nice and hard and durable. And that's what we've got. We've got the ones that were textured up real aggressively.
And we've got the ones that are a little bit more shiny and kind of trying to look like marble. Both sort of deteriorated, but this more stony and this more slick, shiny, marbly. For the marble, I'm thinking of sticking with black, but I'm gonna use some grays to get a little bit more texture in there, especially on the parts that are chipped. And I'm going to attempt a sort of marble pattern. I'm thinking just like white or light gray, maybe a couple streaks of silver or gold. We'll see. You watching this will know sooner than me filming this if I can pull that off. And for the really crumbly, rocky, stony ones, I'm thinking like a light green, kind of like a unpolished jade. I'm not a geologist, which I think is the second time I've said that in this video. So yeah, I don't know exactly what stone that is emulating, but that's the color I want to go with. I don't want to just do pure white, even though this is, by chess rules, the white set. I'm going to go with like a light, rocky green kind of color. Oh, one more thing. Also done a nice black prime on the chessboard. Still see it broken, but I'm gonna add a tiny bit of green. If you've been watching my videos, you're probably not surprised to hear that. Is greenery and foliage necessary on this type of application at all? No, but I like that idea. I think that if this is the first video of mine that you're seeing because you wanted to know how I made this chess set, well, typically I make realistic dioramas and terrain pieces for tabletop RPGs and war games. So foliage and kind of overgrown and kind of detailed, that's kind of my vibe. That's my aesthetic. So I have to throw a little bit of greenery into this. So in any case, I'm not super worried about the cracks. I think this looks so good. We're gonna paint these squares the same colors as the chess pieces. I'm just gonna do the chess pieces first while this has a chance to dry. Without further ado, let's paint.
I know I'm not the only one who thinks this, but after the priming step, everything gets really exciting. It just looks so cool. It brings everything together. I grabbed a few colors. More on this stuff later, but I also added this distress oxide stuff, or rather I didn't add it, I took it out and I'm going to use it later. But I mixed up all of those paint colors. I think I threw a little bit of black in there too to desaturate, and just slapped it all over as a base coat. I actually went a little heavy with this first queen piece, but my goal here was to do more of a heavy overbrush and not worry so much about getting it into the tiny little holes of black. I like the way that looks where you have a little bit of the black peeking through. So that's what I did for most of the rest of them. This is exactly the color I was going for. Once it dried a little bit darker, so I made sure to do some heavy dry brushing of progressively lighter and lighter greens. Here you can see me doing that. Dry brushing is so fun. It's such a quick and easy way to get detail, and it works especially well for things like rocks. I mean, you can do dry brushing for all sorts of things, minis, other bits of terrain, but it sings with rocky, stony type of textures. It just picks up all of the little details that you've carved or otherwise have on your piece, and it just makes everything look super dimensional and interesting. In that previous clip, I also added some light gray as the final dry brush, and those are the final results. Back to that distress oxide stuff, here I am spraying it on some of the pieces. Now, fundamentally, I misunderstood how this stuff works. You're supposed to spray it and then spray water. It's water activated, and it makes this kind of mottled looking, distressed look. This is without water. This is just me spraying it straight on the model, and I liked how it looked. I was intending for it to look like this. I wanted it to have a kind of rocky, stony, speckly texture. So I sprayed it on all the models, not knowing that in a later step, which you'll see in a second, when I add a wash, it was gonna mess these up, but it's kind of a happy accident. The end result is fantastic, so not super worried about it, but if you ever use this distress oxide stuff, read how it's supposed to work, because I didn't do it correctly. Back to the aforementioned wash, I took a little bit of green ink and some black ink and made a pretty light wash to add to these. I didn't want to darken them up too much, but I did want to just make those recesses really pop. It's hard to see on camera, but this is the point where it kind of started to wet and mess up that spotty distressed oxide stuff I sprayed, but the end result is great. Can you see all the little dots of that spray stuff? Not really, because it kind of melted into the wash, but I think it's a happy accident because I thought these looked absolutely fantastic. Can I ever recreate this? I don't know, but I love this. This is the exact color and look I was going for. On to the marble. This was trickier than I thought. I started with the pure black of the Mod Podge primer base. I just kept that as is and added a slightly lighter gray dry brush to pick up some of those chipped details and corners. But I wasn't loving the coverage. I think maybe it's either the quality of the paint I was using or also maybe because there's so many flat areas. I thought it looked bad at first, but in that end result, I actually came around on it. I think it looked fine. This, however, I think looked awesome. Here I started freehanding the marble. I got this technique from a video a long time ago. I'm so sorry I couldn't find it to credit, but someone was painting marble effects on a mini or a base or something, and they just took some wet paint, drew a line, and then took a second brush with water and kind of quickly, while the paint was still wet, rubbed it along one edge of the paint streak to kind of have it feather. Now, those of you who are really good at mini painting probably can achieve this in a bunch of different ways very easily. This took me a long time to kind of master. In fact, the clips that you're watching now that I ended up filming are not my best attempts. I do end up painting a lot of this marble effect off camera, and the results looked fantastic. Here are some of the results here. Yeah, that's all the results I have of the marble. Now, I mean, you'll see more, but I think for that last clip, I pressed the shutter button off a little too soon. I thought I was recording for like a lot longer than that, and I was kind of talking about the different bits of marble. That's all I have for now, but you'll see more. Back to the video. I definitely knew I wanted the marble to be glossy, so I took some gloss Mod Podge, I thinned it down with a little bit of water, and I put it on all of the marble pieces only. Now, I could have used a spray varnish, a gloss varnish. I have an airbrush. I could have done a gloss, airbrush kind of varnish. I went with Mod Podge simply because it's what I had. I mean, honestly, I'm trying to use up more of the materials that I have rather than continuously buying new products where I have something that will be good enough. And this was good enough. For some final details, the first thing I wanted to do was put a base on all the pieces. With the XPS foam and the paint, I find that it doesn't matter how much they dry and how much I varnish them, they always are kind of a little tacky when in contact with each other, like when the piece would be in contact with the board. And I didn't want it to rip any of the paint or just stick together or just otherwise mess up anything. So I glued a bunch of EVA foam on the bottom, and this made for a really nice tactile feel. I don't know what these tests are doing for you, the audience, visually, but they felt really good to me. Back to the chessboard. I didn't film painting it, but I painted it in the exact same way that I painted the pieces, with the exception of the marble stripes. I did not bother doing that on the black pieces. But the outer side of the board, the rim and the in-between squares really needed some love. So finally, I'm gonna add some grass. And I've said it multiple times in this video, but the reason why I wanted to add grass was just because I'm a terrain maker, I'm a diorama maker, this is my aesthetic. I wanted this to look like you've just come into this kind of garden maybe, and there's this giant chessboard overgrown with grass and flowers. I still want it to be playable, so I didn't go too overboard, but I just thought it would add a nice little kind of bit of lore and story to this chessboard. So I just applied that with a bunch of glue and spray tack in multiple layers until I was happy with it. Before the glue dried, I also shoved in a couple little tufts of grass, making sure that they weren't making the chessboard unplayable, but just adding a little bit of extra detail. And this hasn't dried yet, so that's why it looks white, but I'm already really excited with this. The next day, I came into my office to see how it dried, and it looked awesome. A lot of the grass had stuck to the kind of tacky black squares, and I actually ended up reinforcing that with more glue because I thought it looked cool. Yes, I didn't intend for them to be grassy, but I love how they looked in the end. With that, the last step was just to paint the rim black, clean up the edges a little bit, and then it was done. I am not kidding when I said I added a lot of glue to this. I didn't want it to be flaking off when playing chess, but it's not going anywhere. I did end up covering these little bits of glue with a little bit more grass off camera. And that's gonna do it for the chess set. Before I show you the grand reveal, I just want to say thank you so much for watching this video. I had a really fun time making this video. If you're familiar with my channel and you've watched some of my videos, you might know that I just got off of a pretty big project that I called JunkTober, where I put out a video every single day in the month of October building this big, spooky, epic graveyard. And at the exact same time as that, I also was part of a really massive and cool YouTube collaboration called Monster Bash. So this was kind of a fun, more chill video where I just made something a little bit simpler. I mean, it did take a little bit more time than I thought it was going to take, but it was still really fun and I loved doing it. I'm hoping to continue posting on a pretty semi-regular basis moving forward. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you do, consider subscribing. It really helps every time you watch, like, and subscribe and share videos. It quite literally tells YouTube to push my videos out to other people. It's a whole complicated algorithm. I don't even really get it myself. Consider subscribing, hit the notification bell, share this, do all the YouTube stuff, please. And now, without further ado, here is the final reveal, and I'll see you in the next video.